When Grounded launched, my kids and I jumped right in on day one. About an hour or so in, our base got attacked by larvae. The next night, there were more larvae. The night after that, there were even more. We got completely overwhelmed and decided to come back to the game later. I found out soon after that there was a bug that was causing larvae to spawn much more frequently than normal. Flash forward to a few months ago, and we started playing Grounded again. After a few in-game days, I was surprised to find no insects were attacking our base. Unless an aggressive insect followed us there, we were safe. This was a big disappointment. I was expecting and wanting to have to defend our base, but sadly that's not required, at least not right now. I hope in the future that periodic insect raids can be added to the game, as it would give more reason to building. Right now we can build amazing bases, but they are mostly cosmetic. Sure, they store our resources, but we could just as easily place everything on top of the baseball or a rock that the insects can't reach. Of course, if raids were added to the game, we'd need some better defenses to protect ourselves, and that's what I'm going to discuss in this video. Using the resources currently in the game and my experience from other similar games, I came up with 7 traps that could be added to Grounded. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure to do so now so you don't miss any future videos. Let's get started. So first up, let's look at the different traps that are in the game right now. Right now, there's only 3 traps in the game. First one's going to be the spike strip. This is made out of a weed stem and some needles and some other resources here. And what this is you place it on the ground and you can place it like around your base, or you can make traps with it where you can farm insects or resources. What happens is the insects will walk into it and take damage. And it works okay. It does need to be repaired over time. It's probably better for like smaller insects such as like ants or aphids or weevils or whatever, because they'll die pretty quickly. I have tested it against spiders. In fact, I tried to pin in the wolf spider that's underneath the leaf near the oak tree, and I put, I think, 2 or 3 layers of these spike traps and stood there and tried to get it to come towards me, and it basically just ran right through the spike traps. It did take damage, but it did not stop the wolf spider from going over it. So some insects are more likely to back away from it, while others, like the wolf spider or the orb weavers, will just walk straight over it and get to you. So that's basically like the main defense that you can put up. And this was actually what we had around our base when we got hit on the very first day of launch in early access. We basically surrounded our base with spike strips, but it didn't matter. There were so many larvae. There was probably 50 to 100 larvae, and they basically just overwhelmed the spike traps. They got destroyed, and they just started destroying everything. The second one's going to be the lure trap. The lure trap basically works well with the spike trap in that you can put the lure trap behind it, behind the spike traps. So you could build them in like a triangle or square or circle or whatever. Put the lure trap in the middle, and the insects will be lured to it. And I'm pretty sure it attracts all the different kinds of insects. So what will end up happening is I'll end up walking into it, or you can actually you can place these on top if you build a floor. So basically, if you have a floor, you can put them on the floor. But if you put a roof up, a flat roof, you can actually put them up there. So you can use this to actually harvest, get bees and mosquitoes as well. So you can place these up on top of a floor. They just have to be on a floor piece. You can put the lure trap behind them, and the insects will basically either fly or walk into it and try to get to this and take damage. Now, do note the lure trap was changed in the Shroom and Doom update. So now, instead of just having durability loss from being attacked, it actually has a time limit. I think it's like 8 minutes. After 8 minutes, it just breaks and goes away. Third one on the list is the tripwire bomb. What this is a tripwire you place down. This is really easy to craft. The issue with this is that you need to have splat burst or brat burst to put in there. And those require ant eggs, and ant eggs are not the easiest thing to get. You're probably not going to be able to get a ton of them. In fact, in playing in a survival world for a couple 100 hours, and now we don't always check the ant hills, we just don't really get a lot of these. I think when we took them to fight the broodmother the first time, we probably had like 6 or 7 of them or something like that. And that was after like actively farming them for a while. So the tripwire, which I think could actually, we could talk about this first. Instead of this being a tripwire bomb, I think what it could be is just get the bomb part off of there and just make it a tripwire. And it would work well with some of the traps that I'm going to show. So what I've done is I've categorized the traps into 3 different categories. So we have ceiling traps, wall traps, and floor traps. And we're going to go over each one of those. But first, what I wanted to show was kind of like some simple defenses here. So this will be something simple I'll build, like maybe if this is my starter house or something like that. Build the house, put a couple fences around it, and basically put the spike traps here. Now the issue with this is, in order for us to get into here, we can obviously jump over the fence, but a player will take damage from walking through a spike trap. Then we got the lure traps back here, which would lure them in there. I probably wouldn't normally do that. I just wanted to show them off. But basically how like raids would work, because like right now this is completely not necessary. You could basically just fence it off or do actually nothing, because the insects like I said, like a wolf spider or an orb weaver or something chases me over here, it would chase me and just stand outside the house. But the rest of the insects, other than the ants will try to get to your food if they can reach them. So if they're on ground level. So for example, if I had food sitting like down on the other side of this wall right here, the ants would try to get to it, but they don't typically, I think, damage the walls. And even if they do such little damage, it doesn't even matter. So right now, like I said, there's no raids, but the way I would see raids happening would be probably tied to progression in the game. And by progression, I would mean completing the labs. So one game that I played recently that has a really good system for this is Valheim. Valheim is a Viking survival game, also in early access, came out earlier in 2021. And as you can see, the lore traps just disappeared because I placed them about 8 minutes ago, so they're gone. And the way the raids work in Valheim is there's 5 bosses in the game, and after you kill each boss, you will end up actually, before you kill the first boss, there's a small raid that can happen. It's just like some small creatures in the forest that'll come attack. Not a big deal. And then after you kill each subsequent boss, it changes the raid type. So after each boss, it gets progressively harder. So after the 5th boss, which is currently the highest boss that's in the game, you end up getting attacked by different creatures from the biome. So there's 5 different biomes currently. Each biome has a boss, and after you kill the boss in that biome, it'll trigger raids from those enemies in there. So it gets progressively harder. So basically, it doesn't overwhelm you at the beginning. You will get attacked by creatures that are easy to deal with, that you can deal with early on. And as you progress through the game, get better resources, you'll start getting attacked more and more by tougher enemies. And it's not every night. It's periodic, so it's not every night. And if you're not at your base, it won't get attacked. So the way I could see it working in Grounded would be something similar, whereas we have a bunch of different labs. So perhaps like before you do the oak tree lab, your base would just get attacked by worker ants. Then after you fix Burgle, maybe it upgrades and now you can get attacked by soldier ants. Or maybe it could be something like maybe they'll be when they add the ant queen, or they add some kind of task that you have to complete or quest you have to complete inside of one of the ant hills. Maybe then soldier ants comes, and so forth and so on, to the point where like the koi lab would unlock a certain ones, the hedge lab would unlock certain insects, the haze lab would unlock certain insects, and the lab that's up there on the wall that we currently can't get to would unlock different insects. So basically what would happen is after you complete each one, there'll be tougher and tougher insects coming to attack you on a periodic basis. And maybe it could be, depending on the difficulty. So if you're playing on normal, it would be just maybe like every 5 in-game days. If you're playing on medium, it'd be every 3. And if you're playing on WoW mode, it might be like every day or something along those lines, just so you could slide the scale. So I know some players probably don't want to deal with this mechanic, but I kind of think right now that in order to make building actually relevant in the game, other than just doing it for fun, we kind of need to have our bases get attacked. So that's that. Let's really quickly just jump in and go through the 7 different traps that I came up with. So what I did was I placed the traps into 3 different categories: ceiling, wall, and floor. And they're going to be in the category of where they're placed. So obviously if it's a ceiling trap, it's going to be placed on the ceiling tile. If it's a wall trap, it gets placed on the wall. And if it's a floor trap, it gets placed on a floor tile. Now, before I show you the first trap, be mindful that my artistic abilities are very limited, and I was using the best images I could possibly find. Surely the developers could make these traps look a lot cooler in the game. So first we're going to go over the ceiling traps, and the first one I'm going to show you is the gas trap. Now, gas traps are pretty standard in many building games and tower defense games. Specifically, a couple of the games I've played, Fortnite Save the World, as well as the Orcs Must Die series, have gas traps. And the way they work is you place them on a ceiling tile, and when an enemy walks underneath that tile, it is triggered and releases a poisonous gas that does damage over time to the enemies. And I think this will fit perfectly because, as you can see, we have the stink bug gas sack. The stink bug in Grounded releases a poisonous cloud that does damage over time to both players as well as insects that are in the area. And I think this will be perfect. The way it would work is when an insect walks underneath of it, it could trigger, or alternatively, we could rework the tripwire and have the tripwire be placed underneath of it so that when an insect trips the tripwire, it is set off and leaves gas. It'll release the gas, and the gas will stay there for, I guess, the amount of time that the gas stays there when the stink bugs release it. So I think that would be pretty cool. The second ceiling trap is going to be the pebblet drop trap. There are drop traps in many other games. I don't know if I've ever seen any with pebbles. I'm sure a game probably has something like this. Basically, the way this would work would be you would craft a basket, put the pebbles in it. Well, the trap would be a basket with pebbles in it. And what would happen is when a bug walks underneath of it, it would tip over and dump the pebbles on top of the insect. So unlike the gas trap, which I think could reset, I'm not sure, maybe this could reset as well. I could also see it having to be where you have to put the pebbles back in it. I'd be okay with it either way. Although typically in most games, traps reset themselves. So maybe it dumps out one time, and maybe this is one that does a lot of damage, so you could place it like at the, as like close to your base, so it'll be like a last resort. It would do a ton of damage. But basically what would happen would be the pebbles would fall onto the insects that are underneath of it, and there'd be a bunch of pebbles in there, so it would do a bunch of damage to them, and hopefully be the killing blow to them. The third ceiling trap on the list is going to be the spike drop trap. So this will be similar to the pebble drop trap in that it would fall from the ceiling, but basically what it would be a weed stem with some bones on it from the koi pond, or you could even do needles. I could see either one, but I'd kind of, since the spike strip was already using the needles, I think it would be cooler to use the sunken bones from the koi pond. Basically what would happen is when an insect walks underneath this, it would drop down on top of them and basically just impale them, doing a ton of damage. And then it would go back up, and it could reset and have every so many seconds it would go down, or perhaps like every time a different insect walks under it. Again, this could be triggered on its own, or we could use the tripwire to set it off. So as an insect walks through the tripwire, comes down, smashes them, and goes back up, doing a ton of damage. Now the last ceiling trap on the list is probably my favorite, and this is the swinging log trap. So basically what we would use would be some crude rope and a weed stem, and we would have it, as the insect walks on the tile, it would drop down from the ceiling, swing across that tile, and just do damage to all the insects that are on that tile, and then swing back and forth almost like a pendulum. And it could either do that where it swings back and forth, or after it swings one time, it could reset. I could also see this being modified, maybe having an advanced version where you have spikes on it, so you could either put needles on it or the sunken bones on there to do even more damage. But I think this would be a really cool trap. I've definitely seen others suggest something similar to this, so I think this would be well received if we could have a trap like this. In fact, it could even be one, maybe this one is 2 tiles or 3 tiles wide, where you could extend it over and just cover a huge area instead of the others, which are, the others I've shown so far pretty much just been like a single tile where you place them. So maybe this could be one where you place it on a wide area that you want to defend against. Next trap on the list is going to be the first and only wall trap that I currently came up with. And this is going to be a wall launcher. Now don't laugh, because this does kind of look silly. It's got the web trampoline on a wall attached to it. That's the best picture I could come up with using the current resources in the game. But the way this will work, it will basically push the insects back a couple tiles. So maybe it could be something like the smaller insects, maybe like an aphid or a weevil or the ants. It will push back like 3 tiles. And then some of the ones that are a little bit bigger could push back 2. And then others, it maybe only pushes back 1. And then perhaps maybe for like spiders or ladybugs, it doesn't push them back. It basically just stuns them for a second and leaves them in place so they can take damage. And the way you would use this, and this has been used in plenty of other games, specifically a couple of the games I mentioned earlier, this is heavily used in Orcs Must Die as well as in Fortnite Save the World, where basically you build tunnels that have traps in them, and then every so often you have a wall launcher that will just basically push the enemies back through the traps that they've already been through, thus recycling them and not allowing them to get through. If you build tunnels in those games that are sufficient, you can basically just stand there and watch your traps do all the work. I think these would be great. Perhaps they can make them more expensive to craft, because I think they would be super useful and maybe be a little bit OP depending on what other traps are out of the game. But that's the one wall trap I could come up with. If you have ideas for other wall traps, let me know in the comments below. One I'm thinking of currently would be maybe a wall dart trap. These also exist in those other 2 games like I mentioned. Maybe it could shoot like the stinger from a bee out of it, or even like the thistle needles or something like that, something along those lines. That's another one I could think of that would maybe work out. On to the floor traps is the last category, and I do apologize for this. This was the best picture I could get of a fire of this roasting spit without the stuff on it. It does kind of look look blurry there, so I do apologize for that. But basically, this is a roasting spit sitting on a floor tile. The way this will work, it will be like a fire pit trap. So when a insect walks over it, it would just do fire damage to it over time and burn it. And it would be similar to the gas trap, where they would basically take damage over time. Again, this is a very standard trap in many tower defense games, and I think it'll be really useful. You can maybe even use it to deter it. Maybe there could be insects that will not even walk over it, so it'd stop them. Or maybe in the future, there could be an insect that is resistant to the fire damage that could walk through it, so you wouldn't be able to use it against those kind of insects. The 7th and final trap on the list is going to be a sticky trap. Again, this is a trap that's common in other games. The way this works is when an enemy walks over top of it, it gets stuck. So typically what you do is you put this in combination with either wall traps or ceiling traps. And when the insect gets stuck on that tile, it will end up taking more damage because it's getting hit by the traps that are next to it or above it for multiple times. Now to craft this, I threw together weed stems and then some yellow looking goop that could either be the bioluminescent goop, or perhaps when the beehive and stuff is finished, maybe they add honey to the game. So you could either have honey or the bioluminescent goop, throw that in there, and the insects will get stuck in it and they would get trapped. Again, this would probably be one that you would put like at the end of like closer to your base. So maybe you put this with the pebblet drop trap underneath of it, or the spike drop trap, or even the gas trap. Any of them, you could like put them all along there. And what I would see happening is the insects walk up to it, they get stuck, and they just take extra damage. Now you could do something like have the smaller insects get permanently stuck. Maybe the larger insects like the spiders get stuck for less time. Or maybe there could be insects that are completely resistant to it. So that's the final trap on my list. So those are the 7 traps that I came up with that I think could be added to Grounded. If you have any ideas for other traps or to base defenses, let me know in the comments down below. I definitely think that raids would be a huge addition to the game and would definitely be welcomed by many players. I've been reading a lot of comments on both my YouTube channel as well as on the subreddit and on the Discord for Grounded, where people are kind of just like looking for something to do. And I'm kind of falling into that camp at this point where I love the game and I love the idea of the game and I like building, but over the last couple of months, we basically built everything we could possibly think of. There's nothing really for us to do right now. We have so much raw science saved up that when like the Shroom and Doom update came out, we were able to buy everything immediately. And I think we have like 26K saved up right now, so we can easily buy anything to add. Of course, we could just start over, and that's fun to some extent, but you can only do that so many times with a game before you end up just getting burned out on doing the same thing over and over again. So while the developers are waiting or taking their time adding the story to the game, and even after they do that, I think it would make sense if you want people to stay engaged with the game and continue to playing it, to have stuff where you have raids. And like I said, the raids could either be triggered they could just happen randomly. They could be triggered after you complete certain story events. So maybe if you don't do anything, you don't want raids, you just don't do anything in the story, you just sit there and build whatever you want to build. After you complete each lab, it could unlock a different level of raid, or after you beat a certain boss, maybe it unlocks different raids. Maybe killing a certain number of a specific type of insect will cause a raid. I know in Valheim, once you kill so many trolls, then trolls will start randomly attacking your base. So that's another idea. I just think that the game has great building mechanics, but it does have the same problem that other survival games have had, where they have all these base building options, but in reality, the base building is kind of like not really needed to play the game. It's just like a side thing. And it'd be a shame to see this game like just fall by the wayside just because there's not much to do other than the story. So adding base raids or even like a endless survival mode would be an awesome addition to the game, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I know people have different opinions of the game. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you click the like button, as it really helps my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.